Hello, I'm Enzo, and I've often heard other people say that E-Tech weapons in Borderlands 2 are really bad. So I wanted to see if you could beat the game using only E-Tech weapons. Since E-Tech weapons are actually good and fun in normal mode, and because I'd get comments saying it was too easy, not to mention the can of worms that getting them in normal mode is, because they only spawn after a certain level, this run is going to be done at the max difficulty, level 80 and OP 10, with the other obvious rule of no bar, because that would make things even easier. You're probably wondering how my gear loadout is going to work. This is one of the rare times I had a good idea, and that was to use my main OP 10 save, which I reset every time for these OP 10 runs, and speedran the Pirate DLC to farm the treasure room, since this is the only place I can think of that has this many good chests. Normally, you wouldn't be able to farm this. Easily, at least. But since I finally figured out mods, I've been using the map loader mod to save my position and reload the map so I can farm things super quick and easily. Having a good idea is rare for me alone, but it actually working is like once in a blue moon. And to my surprise, it did work perfectly. Thanks to this, I can easily farm this loot room for quite a few E-Tech weapons. This is also great because I wanted a different variety of E-Tech weapons, and they're definitely not going to be perfect. I decided to do this until I had an inventory full of E-Tech weapons. I found some cool stuff along the way, and I got a simple purple TDR shield that I used for this run. Well, for a little bit. You'll see. After getting a decent collection, I decided to test out some builds to test their viability. I started with Salvador, cause I was originally going to play as him, but yeah, even with a max survivability build, it just didn't work. I'm just dying too fast. The main issue with E-Tech weapons is that none of them have healing like on Moxie weapons, so I have to figure something else out. My other character idea was Krieg. I've already done runs with Axton and Maya in OP10, Gage and Zero are out of the question, but Krieg has potential. Healing from elemental damage and incredible survivability. I think he's exactly who I need, and I've never played OP10 as him before, so this will be very interesting. After resetting the playthrough, I decided to test out the build on Knuckle Dragger, and it didn't work that well. I can't say I've ever died to Knuckle Dragger before. I've been playing this game pretty much since it was released. That's definitely not a good sign. The main issue is clearly my weapons, and I'm still trying to figure out which ones are good or just absolute garbage, which most of them are. It's definitely not looking good for E-Tech, but some things are still viable, especially because I'm not using class mod just yet. And after swapping to a torch one, which is the one I'll be using for pretty much the entire run, the incredible boost of fire damage will definitely carry me through most of the game, hopefully, but not so fast. I was getting really confident with this build, considering most of the enemies were going pretty easily at this point, but then Boom Boom shattered that reality instantly. They are a great example of why bosses shouldn't have health regen. I, quite literally, deal no damage. Now, I wanted a bunch of random gear so that I could try everything and judge how it worked, but even with optimal gear, this might still be impossible. Little Boom is technically killable with slag and abusing TDR reloads with this corrosive pistol, but Big Bertha can't be slagged. Well, okay, yes, it can be, but only visually. The damage bonus doesn't apply, and it regens far faster than I can deal damage. After trying everything in my arsenal and many deaths, I decided to lower the OP level to 9. Quick editing note, I may have completely forgotten that I also used the Rough Rider here. I thought I started using that at Flint, but oh well. This fight might be possible with perfect guns, but I don't have those, because that's part of the fun of this challenge. This fight also exposed this run's other major issue. Ammo. That's why I wanted to play Salvador originally, but we all see how that went. Since my damage is non-existent, it takes a lot of bullets to kill a single enemy, even with fire against flesh, and the costs add up very quickly. For some reason, there's also no ammo vendor until Flint in this map. It makes absolutely zero sense, so I'm going to run past as many enemies as I possibly can. Now that I have time to say some other stuff, I'm using some mods, like I said earlier. The first one is BL2 Fix, which actually can be installed with the Epic Games version, which is awesome because the community mod manager just won't, which it's so annoying when mod creators don't make stuff for Epic, but only for Steam. So that's one of my favorite things about BL2 Fix, besides all the obvious bug fixes and additional options. I disabled all of the major gameplay changing options, so it is literally just Borderlands 2 vanilla, but with dialogue skip, cutscene skip, and other quality of life stuff. The map reloader mod is the other one that I've already mentioned, and Python part notifier, which is needed for another mod, that's why I have it, but is insanely useful for seeing what parts are on an item, that's why I kept it here. So people that don't know parts, and I am very much one of them, I only know few, can see what's on all of my weapons. I almost forgot about relics. There are magenta relics, which magenta represents E-Tech, and I got one in this run, but I didn't use any for this run. I was just using the standard Vault Hunter's relic as a placeholder mostly. I didn't use them partially because I forgot, but also because they can be at least somewhat decent. Like the one that gives me more fire damage or even corrosive would be crazy here, but that is always an option and definitely would have made the run far easier. So far, we've seen this loadout doing really good against normal flesh enemies, but there is one slight issue. And by slight issue, I mean boom boom run ending level. An enemy that resists and sometimes immune to fire, Captain Flint. My normal strategy of running in and hoping for the best works well with this build, but not for this fight. I know I said that boom boom was almost impossible, but Flint is quite literally impossible. Like, I can't do this fight legitimately. After a ton of deaths, I had to do a few things to beat Flint in the end. Number one, I sadly had to go down to OP 8 to even deal enough damage. Number two is I had to try a bunch of different shields to see how they affect me, and I ended up using the Rough Rider for the rest of the entire run. I know it's not E-Tech, but it's got a super unique effect, and my shield's just gonna be broken throughout the entire run anyways, so I might as well have the extra survivability. And three, the only reason I managed to beat this fight, is the classic Flint cheese, where you knock him out of the arena. It took me a while to get this right, but using grenades or other knockback to knock Flint out of his arena breaks his AI and keeps him stuck in place, which is very convenient. It's a shame I had to do all of this to beat this fight, but that just shows you how bad E-Tech weapons are. I could have used a relic to boost shock or corrosive damage, and I really should have gone for corrosive, but I have a perfect parts yellow jacket that I used in my last run, which was the OP10 Bees run. And since that was E-Tech, I decided I could use it in this run, but since I used it a lot in the last run, obviously I didn't want to use it a lot in this one. So that was how horrible this fight was. Since Southern Shelf took that long, the next few areas being super easy, thanks to nice fleshy enemies, was a nice change of pace. Before I get on with the story, I think it's only fitting that I fight Doc Mercy, which was pretty easy. Another indicator of just how bad some E-Tech weapons really are is the gun that you get to do the second part of this mission. I think at some points this gun is literally just healing the enemies. But you don't need OP levels to know how bad this gun is. It's terrible, even in normal mode. Not to mention the insane amount of ammo that it consumes. Few more things I may have forgotten. I do apologize, this is a massive run after all. Was this legendary torch class mod I got from this Tubby, which I thought was pretty funny. I'd be using a legendary torch either way then. And Frostburn Canyon, like I said, was really easy. The only true issue was the ironclad psychos. They are a menace, mostly because they're resistant to fire. You'll see that problem way more later on though. In the dust, vehicles are horribly balanced for OP levels, so corrosive quite literally melts them. Bad Maw was super easy thanks to E-Tech projectiles dealing splash damage, at least some of them, not all, but mostly the plasma casters, and hitting him through his shield. That also makes all nomads easy. For the Bloodshot Stronghold itself, I was planning to just run through it, but there is some mandatory combat parts, and running through was not working out well for me at all. This entire time, I haven't even mentioned my frustration with slag weapons. To deal a decent amount of damage to enemies in Ultimate Vault Hunter and OP levels, the enemies need to be affected by slag, which I have quite a few weapons for, but the primary ones I've tried are my 2 assault rifles, which each have 10% slag chance, and the shotgun that I've been using is a 35. I want to say that these are bugged or something like that because it feels like it's only 10% of their shown values, because I refuse to believe that dumping an entire mag into enemies still doesn't slag them. I know my luck is bad, but there is no way it can be that bad. So I'm going to blame Borderlands 2's spaghetti code. Mad Mike is an absolute terror, but my fire damage is way too powerful. Bloodshot Stronghold was just a slow grinding journey to the end, but definitely not the worst level so far. Do you guys remember the main issue with Boom Boom? Well, okay, there were a few, but I'm referring to the armored health bars. I have a few corrosive weapons, but they aren't that great. That, and the fact armored enemies resist fire, usually, which my entire build revolves around. I only really deal damage and gain survivability when both I and enemies are on fire. This section went way slower than inside the dam, and pretty much everything else up to this point, besides the bosses. Not to mention my mounting dread about the Warden fight for this and later robot levels. All of my other corrosive weapons are absolute garbage, and I have no good assault rifles. It's a full Vladov-parted AR with damage prefix. This is the main reason the Bloodshot Ramparts didn't take like 2 or 3 hours. The baddie loader here was the first major bump in the road. Again, no fire means no survivability, and when I get downed, I lose my self-fire, which means a lot of my buffs are lost. I had to run back and forth through the map to refill my ammo, but even with that, the Warden fight didn't go well at all. To add insult to injury, or salt in the wound, considering I'm playing Krieg, he spawned 2 baddie constructors. Now, I don't play enough OP10 or Ultimate Vault Hunter mode to know if that's normal, but I certainly have never seen that before. With all of that noted, there is definitely no way I'm beating him. So I traveled away, which I thought would have sent me to the Gulag, but apparently just resets the map. So this was not intentional. I really was going to fight him at the Friendship Gulag, but it is technically a second chance, so I'm gonna take it. Unfortunately, this meant I had to go back through the Bloodshot Stronghold, which is just as slow as before. More interestingly, I faced my first and only crash of the run here. I really thought this would have crashed way more by now, considering the amount of particles, especially created by slag. Slag particles crash the game the most often, but that just goes to show you the incredible power of BL2 Fix. I heavily recommend this mod. All of these annoyances have caused me to take some drastic measures. I used the save editor to give myself some new weapons, and spawn in the ramparts itself. I didn't expect to spawn right next to the Warden, but I'm not complaining, cause it's just saving me time. The Florentine is a gun I've wanted to try for a very long time now, and I think it's my favorite E-Tech gun so far. Shock plus slag damage, Seraph rarity, and a plasma caster. Yeah, I'm in love. The Warden is still stupidly difficult, but that's what this Topnia is for. I've had it the entire time, I just didn't want to use it since it's expensive and pretty powerful. This is one of the rare times that I actually need to use it. The second edited gun is this corrosive Vladov pistol. It's pretty much a pistol version of the assault rifle. I want to see what a perfect one looks like, and it's actually not bad. With that pain finally out of the way, I shouldn't really have to explain how lighting the bar kids on fire went. I mean, fire build. The rest of Tundra Express went very quick, considering there's no mandatory combat, and I literally just snuck by all the enemies on my way to launch the missiles. Next up is more loader territory, so we all know how this will go. It's gonna take a little bit. Wilhelm was going to be a slight issue, considering my lack of damage, and his surveyors are annoying to deal with, and I don't know if he's classified as flesh or armor, but in the end I decided Topnia goes brr, and it was beautiful. With an added bonus of the absolute classic power core getting launched off the edge of the map. For the next main areas, I decided to have absolutely no business with the rats or stalkers, and I'm not even going to attempt to cross the Exploder Bridge. I'm just getting through this place as fast as possible. There are two main issues that I'm currently facing. The Constructor is optional, and considering how the Warden went, I am going to have none of that. The other one is the Gluttonous Thresher. Gluttonous. If you watched my last Minecraft video, you might get it. I thought he would be way worse, but the Florentine was amazing for both slag damage and shredding his shield, while, my fire build does the rest. Overlook's beacon defense wasn't that bad, mostly due to the ammo vendor being, right there, conveniently. So I could go ham with the assault rifle that I love so much. I only lost the beacon like 4 times, so I'll take it. After that is the Preserve, and it was a breeze, mostly at least. I completely forgot that rabid enemies exist, and they are a massive pain to deal with. Their damage isn't even the main issue, it's just their knockback and speed that forces me to deal with them, or else they'll just bother me for the entire level. I may have also lost to Puma and Timon, so I didn't kill them in the end. The only real issue so far is the Super Baddie Loader, and this is where I started to encounter Krieg's whole issue, momentum. Now, as you might have seen, combat gets a whole lot more difficult when I lose my fire buffs, and kill skills, but those aren't nearly as important. When they're active though, I'm almost invincible. And that's what Krieg is all about, that momentum. And that describes most fights in this run very well. And all of that momentum was an issue leading up to Bloodwing, as you can probably see by the death counter. Speaking of Bloodwing, the fight was far easier than I actually expected, mostly thanks to the Florentine, and this Fire Maliwan rocket launcher I haven't used yet. It is super cool, and makes me regret not using the Norfleet. I literally haven't ever gotten or used it, and now I really want to try it. But I knew it was insanely overpowered, so that's why I'm not using it here. In 1000 Cuts, most enemies can just be ignored, and I did my classic Goliath strat just because I could. The rest of this level was super easy. We've already seen all of these loaders before. I also ran through Opportunity. Unlike my other 2 OP10 runs, I can actually deal with crowds of large enemies. Well, survive inside of them at least. So Jack's body double was super easy for once, which is very nice. The dialogue skip from BL2 Fix also makes this way faster. Back to 1000 Cuts, I ran into a major issue, and that is the Constructor guarding the door. Again, robots resisting fire means my survivability is way worse. Not to mention Constructors like 90% grenade damage resistance, and I'm pretty sure Plasma Casters deal grenade splash, and when I die, well, long story short, it turned into a quite literal death spiral. This forced me to use the one word not present in this run so far: patience. This build allows me to just run into enemies, which is my playstyle, but unfortunately that doesn't work for everything. I had to slowly work my way through the enemies here before I had a chance to deal with the Constructor itself. The baby turrets weren't an issue, but the surveyors were. Flying enemies are really hard to hit with these slow projectiles. That will become more of an issue as the run goes on, but here's what I've been truly dreading in this level: the Super Baddie Constructor. Well, the lack of ammo as well. Like, why is there no vendor close to this fight either? It makes no sense. and makes this fight way more difficult. The climb and mad dash to the cheese spot is bad enough, and it was going decently, at least for dealing no damage, but the combo of a gun loader, the constructor's turret, and missiles got me when I had him so low. It was tragic. However, after 20 minutes of fighting this abomination in total, it's finally dead, and I get to go to bunker, with a quick stop for Face McShooty, where I really should have tried to get a spiker pistol, but went with the super cool Vladov sniper that I love instead. It is oddly accurate. The autocannons before bunker got melted by the Florentine itself, but also with some help from corrosive AR, and this fight was incredibly difficult. The main reason might shock you. I had no ammo. More specifically, no money for ammo, but same thing. Even after I sold most of the guns I haven't used or liked, which has been my strategy for getting money so far. Thanks to looting every container and drops from the buzzards, the fight was going at a pace, a very slow one that is, until tragedy struck at the end. With no ammo, even with this omen, which I used only a tiny bit, I thought it was E-Tech, but no, it's probably not, so not a valid weapon. And lacking revives, there goes that 25-minute attempt. I exited the game and used the save editor to refill my money, and it was time for round 2. My damage hasn't changed, but the ability to shoot constantly without worrying about running out of ammo made the whole thing a lot quicker. Money can work wonders. Angel Core wasn't the worst. I mean, we've all seen all of these loaders before. I only died once, and the main issue was actually the menace of core defense turrets. Those things hit like trucks. And of course, angelic guards. In a crazy change of events, Sawtooth Cauldron was actually pretty easy, thanks to them being fleshy enemies, vulnerable to fire. I still died, cause that's just this level. And the main issue here was actually the buzzards. Yet again, flying enemies. The other issue is I think you have to slag them to deal decent damage. That's what it feels like at least. And that's difficult because the slow projectiles of plasma casters. The Arid Nexus is also going to be trouble. Besides most of the enemies being robots, there are enemies that can wield rocket launchers, which will one-shot you. My whole plan was just to get all of the mission objectives done as quickly as possible, with a few deaths being involved. The Badlands has its own problems, and it's not the fodder junk loaders. They're relatively easy. I know there is a skip to get to the objective with jumps and grenades, but I have no interest in doing that, and I'm not sure how well Krieg does it. But as a general test to see how my builds work, I always fight Saturn. And it should be absolutely no surprise that this fight was absolutely horrible. Like, this is the worst Saturn fight I've ever had to date. I'm facing quite a few issues here. Besides the classics, lack of damage and ammo, I have no revives, no other enemies to light on fire, and Saturn is immune to fire himself, and I can't even use the coward hut because, well, no ammo. I literally run out of everything. No matter what I tried, nothing was working. After dying to one of his stupid drones that somehow found me, it made me think of a slightly offensive joke, but also truth. POV, Ukraine. Anyways, I save quit again to give myself more money to work with and some super expensive items to sell. I went with the World Burn, but that Tunguska sells for like 56 million. I believe that's the most expensive item, and I should have figured that out first. Here is what all 10 minutes of the fight actually looks like. My pistol technically does the most damage, but I think the explosion is grenade splash, so it might be bad against like constructors. And it's a bit slower than the assault rifle. Speaking of constructors, the last two baddie ones are optional to kill, but they're too big of an issue to leave alone, so they both need to go. Besides being ganked by an enemy E-Tech gun, the rest of the level wasn't too crazy. Same deal with the Iridium Blight door. The surveyors were obviously the biggest issue here. Unsurprisingly, I ran out of ammo again. In another run first, I had to return to the beginning of the level and refill my ammo. I've never ever had to do that before. This is just crazy. After a ton of missed shots, the delaying surveyors were finally dealt with. Heroes Pass is a combination of all of my previous issues. Only one ammo station at the beginning, insanely difficult enemies, fire-resistant robots, and, of course, the super baddie loader and constructor you have to deal with. But we all know how all of that has gone so far. All of that suffering so far has led up to this, the final two bosses. I save quit during the first fight because I swear Jack was immune to slag, but on the second attempt I realized my luck was just that horrible. Jack's fight was more difficult than I expected, but I had no clue what I was in for. I'm just going to say that I had no chance of beating the warrior head on, so I sadly had to use a cheese spot, and that's just the beginning of my problems. The classic 2 strike damage. Low damage, and lack of ammo because of low damage. Thankfully, the ammo bins here do recharge. But here's the catch. It takes 100 seconds to reset. This fight took over 1 hour of sitting here waiting for these containers to recharge. I spent all of my ammo in every single weapon I had. In total, the run took just over 10 hours, but man, this fight made it feel like way more than that. Since I have all of this combat footage, I thought of a cool bonus for you guys. A tier list. For S tier, well, I wasn't planning to add S tier, but the Florentine, like I said earlier, is my favorite E-Tech weapon. The Topnia is also there because it's just insanely powerful. And apparently Vladov E-Tech weapons, now I don't know if it's all of them, but it does feel that way, use 2/3 of the ammo per shot. So you get way more shots out of it, which is super good, especially for a rocket launcher. A tier is plasma casters in general. They're the only viable E-Tech weapons, but they're still outclassed by most normal guns. Also, rocket launchers. I didn't get to use the Bandit, and I think there's a Meteor one. I didn't use that either, but they're still pretty decent because of the special E-Tech rocket effect. In B tier, it's hard to say by the weapon type, but Vladov pistols and assault rifles, specifically Vladov, are the best out of all of the E-Tech manufacturers. In C tier is Vladov snipers. They deal crazy damage, but drain your ammo like instantly. In D tier, shotguns. They are all really bad. All manufacturers, all elements. Even my 35% slag shotgun couldn't slag 99% of the time. In E tier, it is all the other snipers. Maliwan, Hyperion. They are just garbage, but they aren't the worst E-Tech weapons. The worst E-Tech weapons in F tier are bandit assault rifles. I don't need to say anything else. You guys have seen how they perform already. Obviously, this isn't a complete tier list. It could be way more detailed and specific, but maybe that's for another time. In the end of all of this, I've come to a realization. E-Tech may be cool, but it's pretty terrible. My best piece of advice for literally everything applies to this as well. Don't. Just don't. It's horrible. At least for harder difficulties. They are relatively fun in like normal mode if you get the right thing. So, can you beat Borderlands 2 with only E-Tech? Kind of. If you lower it to OP8, cheat a little with editing in guns, a unique shield, and tons of money to buy ammo, sure. But that's it for now. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And a special thank you to all my channel members. All of you are awesome. This is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.